Hello. In this clip from our Justia webinar, The Addicted Lawyer, How We Got Here, Where We're Headed, attorney Brian Cuban shares his story of experiencing mental health and substance abuse issues. He illustrates the ways in which these problems can present themselves to law students and lawyers. If you'd like to see more Justia videos on law practice and legal marketing, be sure to subscribe to our channel.
Thanks for having me here today. I'm going to talk to you about mental health in the legal profession and compassionate community. I'm also going to talk to you about how compassionate community can help break the stigma that keeps so many of us in the profession from seeking help. What is a compassionate community? The Center for Compassion defines it as community in which the needs of all the inhabitants of that community are recognized and met. The well-being of the entire community is a priority, and all people living in it are treated with respect. A compassionate law firm or law practice does not mean everything is hunky-dory. It's an environment where we are uncomfortable when we see someone struggling. That's normal. We shouldn't, however, distance from it. We should close distance. People, for the most part, want to be part of a community, especially a compassionate one. We want to belong to something greater than ourselves, right? We may want the support of that community when we struggle, even if we don't specifically ask for it because of the stigma associated with our struggle. The legal profession is no exception to that. We are people. We have our unique stories. We get depressed, we stress, we cry, we laugh, we grieve. We are all, however, more than our struggle, but when we look at our peers, we're often uncomfortable acknowledging that struggle, let alone a person with a life story, that associate you never talk to. As a macro community, we survive the common struggles of law school, licensing, the struggle of wearing or not wearing a suit comprised of our clients' pain and suffering, our families, our own. The irony is that those very commonalities are the same struggle that often put us at odds with each other in the most uncivil of ways in the civil profession. A lesser but crisis level percentage of us share the common struggle of addiction, problem drinking, depression, and suicidal thoughts. That's me for all of them. How do we as professionals foster a culture of compassion towards each other? A culture of community in which we both take care of ourselves and our colleagues. It is through that compassionate community that we can start breaking stigma. And it starts with the story within all of us. I'll start with mine. I want to take you back in the hot tub time machine. The Dallas Mavericks are going to the NBA championship for the very first time. My brother Mark had bought the team in January of 2000, and we had had some success going to the playoffs, but this was our first trip to the big show. And as you might expect, I was going to get some pretty good seats for those games. Yeah. I also had the opportunity to get 2 good seats for friends. I called up my brother. He said, "Sure, Bri, come on over and get them." I go over, I get the tickets. Do you think I gave them to my friends? Nah. You're probably thinking I sold them on eBay for some astronomical amount, right? Lawyer thinking here, a profession of thinkers. Well, I didn't do that because that would be disrespectful to Mark, to the team. I took those 2 tickets and I traded them to my cocaine dealer for $1,000 in cocaine. Selling them on eBay was disrespectful, but trading them to my cocaine dealer was perfectly acceptable in my mind, how the mind works in addiction. My dealer shows up at my door, boop, boop, boop. I go running down. I was high class, he delivered. He hands me this giant bag of cocaine. I give him the 2 tickets. I go running upstairs to my home office. I dump it all out on my wooden home office desk, this giant mountain of cocaine. I wanted to go like I'm Scarface, right? This giant cocaine mountain, cocaine kingdom. Of course I had to do some. Roll up the dollar bill that has been who knows where. Cocaine users are a funny bunch in that regard. We'll wash our hands, we'll use the antiseptic, but we'll pick up a dollar bill or a 20 and roll it up that's been God knows where and stick it up our nose or snort it off the back of a toilet seat that has all kinds of crap on it, right? But cocaine had long stopped giving me the feeling of self-love and self-acceptance. that I got when I did it in a bathroom in Dallas, Texas in 1987. Now it was just pain and shame and chasing the high that was never going to come again. But it was never a self-awareness of maybe I have a problem. It was, well, maybe I need to change from Jack Daniels to Grey Goose. Maybe I need to change my brand of wine. And then came the paranoia that often happens with long-term cocaine use. Do I hear the cops outside? Woo, woo, woo! Flashing lights, go to the window, peek outside. Go back, put the cocaine in the Ziploc baggie, hide it, get in my car. I drive to a Home Depot where I buy electrical faceplates, outlets, a drill, and a saw. I drive back to my house. I go to the bedrooms in the house, to the drywall, take the drill and the saw, bzz, 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 bzz. I drill fake electrical outlets in the drywall in 3 of the bedrooms. I take the cocaine, I put it in smaller Ziploc baggies, put it behind each electrical outlet, close it back up, bzz, 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 bzz. Like the DEA, the cops, and the drug dogs have never thought of that one before. Then I took the cocaine back out again and flushed it down the toilet. The next morning comes, and as so often happens when a perceived negative event gets in the rearview mirror, I wake up, I'm such an idiot. I just flushed now $950 worth of cocaine down the toilet. Who does that? Another call to my brother, 2 more tickets, because there was another game that night. Another call to my drug dealer. He shows up at my house. I open the door. His first words were, dude, you did all of that last night? I didn't want to tell him I'd flushed it down the toilet like a knucklehead. Yes, I did it all. Give me more. I am the king cocaine user of Dallas. I am the anteater of cocaine. Okay, here you go. Knock yourself out, dude. Bloop, bloop, exchange it. Go running back up to my home office. Dump it back out on the desk again. Line some out. Roll up that same nasty dollar bill. But just pain and shame, trying to chase that high that was never going to come again, trying to love myself artificially, trying to fill that void of self-hatred and loathing that I had been dealing with since I was a teenager. And then the paranoia again. This time they're really here. They're really here. I'm in trouble. I could go to jail. I'm a lawyer. I know these things. Go back to the toilet, bend down to my knees like I'd done so many times before, praying or hoping for someone or something to take away the pain of my addiction, and flushed it down the toilet again. They do say that when Dallas flushes, it ends up in Houston, so I think some people in Houston might have got kind of high those 2 nights, right? I actually read a story about that. The insanity of addiction. But addiction is not quote unquote insane. It is a biological brain-based process. If I say that 3 times fast, I'll get it right one of these days. That affects so many of us. And for me, it wasn't just cocaine. By 18 years old, as a freshman at Penn State in 1979, I had developed bulimia and later transitioned into exercise bulimia, which is obsessive compulsive exercise for the primary purpose of offsetting calories. By the time I was 21, moving to 22, I was a full-blown quote-unquote alcoholic, alcohol use disorder, drinking every night, going to class drunk, going to class hungover. By the time I was 26, I became addicted to cocaine use disorder. At 44, my first of 2 trips to a psychiatric facility after a near suicide attempt. Jail. 3 failed marriages, 1 more I get a free set of steak knives. And finally, recovery in 2007. All of that while trying to be a lawyer. Whoa. How does a young boy who grew up in Pittsburgh, PA, baby boomer, in an era where social networking was kickball on the basketball court, cell phones were 2 cups attached to a string, how does that happy little boy morph into a 44-year-old who is so sickened at his reflection, who feels so hopeless that he will never love himself or be loved, that he decides he would be doing his family a favor by ending his life by suicide. What is that process like? Let's go back in that same hot tub time machine to that little boy. Because you have to understand the story. Compassionate community is about at least acknowledging the story, even if we don't know all the details. I am the middle of three boys growing up. My older brother, Mark, who you may know the Mavs and Shark Tank. I have a younger brother, Jeff. Mark, as you might imagine, the firstborn, was outgoing, entrepreneurial. He was selling this door to door, selling that door to door. I remember our local newspaper went on strike. He and his buddies, barely old enough to drive, drove out to Cleveland, which is just over 200 miles from Pittsburgh, bought the Cleveland Plain dealer, drove them back to Pittsburgh and sold them on a street corner of downtown Pittsburgh for exponentially what they paid for him. He knew how to see opportunity and fill it then, and he does now. My younger brother, Jeff, good-looking kid, jock, nationally ranked wrestler, the prom, beer parties, girls, dates, all the things that I associated with love and acceptance. I was classic middle child syndrome. I was shy. I was withdrawn. I trended towards isolation. And I internalized anything negative said to me and about me and wore it like a skin-tight suit. A lot tighter than this suit. And I also had a very difficult relationship with my mother growing up. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this, but I want to make it clear to everyone watching me that I do not blame my mother for my mental health issues. Parents do not cause eating disorders. Parents do not cause addiction. There is a difference between cause and correlation, as I'm sure we all know. But many of the things that happen in the home can correlate with mental health issues later in life. And it will happen to some, and it won't happen, and it may not happen to others. That's why it's correlation. There's a lot of fat shaming in my household growing up. I used to come home from school and eat Chef Boyardee ravioli right out of the can. Do they still have that nowadays, Chef Boyardee? I'd use the old style can opener and go, and eat it with the spoon. My mom would come home from selling real estate. She would see me doing that, and she would say, Brian, if you keep eating like that, you're going to be a fat pig. Now, these were the things my mother said to her. These were the things my great-grandmother said to my grandmother. That wasn't my mother's fault. This was the 1970s. These were the tools she was given as a young mother dealing with her own mental health issues at a time where a woman with a mental health issue, you could be put in an asylum. So we just don't talk about it. And that's what they were called back then. When I came home with bad grades, as her mother said to her, she would call me a dumb bunny. She had a very verbally and mentally abusive with her mother, who also had her own mental health issues. That was not her fault. I don't blame her for that. But as a young boy, not understanding Psychology 101 yet, I grew depressed to hear these things. And I began to eat more Chef Boyardee ravioli and more Chef Boyardee ravioli. And I became a bigger Brian and a bigger Brian. And it so often happens when kids change for what other kids perceive in the negative in school. It happened then, it happens now. I've seen it in law school, I've seen it with lawyers, and it happens in a more insidious way in social networking now. The bullying started. Brian, you need to go to Sears and Roebuck and get a bra for your man boobs. Brian, you need to take an extra notch out on that belt. I developed a very self-deprecating sense of humor as a shield against how much these words hurt me. They were like daggers in my stomach. But I didn't want people to know that, because in my mind, the people who were saying these things to me were the popular kids. This was before Al Gore invented the internet, right? My popularity images were the people I saw every day. The prom king, the prom queen, the kids going to the football games, the kids going to the exclusive after-school parties. Those were my visions of popularity. And in my mind, they were all thin or muscular and good-looking and attractive. I wanted to be part of that so badly. And so I took it and I became the self-deprecating, sad clown, just hanging around on the outside, hoping that one day this group of kids, this group of bullies, but in my mind, the popular bullies, would one day say, Brian, you've survived the initiation, you're one of us. But bullying doesn't work that way. It all culminated in what I call the day of the gold pants. My brother Mark gave me a pair of shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants. Yes, this was the disco era back then, the mid-70s. Now, if you've seen Saturday Night Fever, if you haven't, go see it. Take a look at John Travolta. Imagine John Travolta in those shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants. And now here's Brian in those same pants. Oop, don't imagine that. Ugh. Because I was a heavy kid. Those pants fit Mark fine. They were tight on me. I had to jump up and down. I had to spray the water bottle. My butt looked like 15 cats back there, but I didn't care because I love my brother. He loved me, and I was going to wear those pants to school every day. And I did, and I stood them up in the corner. And the kids made fun of me, and I self-deprecated. I laughed at myself, and it hurt so bad. I'm walking home with a group of these kids one day. It was a mile from the school to my house along a busy street. I'm wearing my shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants. They start making fun of them. They start laughing. I go into my self-deprecation routine. But they decided to take it a little further. They decided that I was just too fat to wear those pants. And they attacked me. They physically assaulted me. And they ripped those pants off me. They ripped my shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants off me, ripped them into shreds and threw them out in the busy street, went on like they had done the greatest and funniest thing ever, high-fiving each other, slapping the backs. I went out in the street in my Fruit of the Loom tighty-whities, my Pittsburgh Pirates t-shirt, my Ked shoes, and my tube socks. Yes, this was the 70s. I gathered up the shreds, I put them over my private parts, and I waddled home. People gawked. No one stopped. I got home, and I went down in the basement with those shreds and threw them away, hoping to forget about that moment, hoping to incinerate that moment. But trauma stays. Trauma remembers. The body remembers. I could today go to that spot in Pittsburgh, PA, and show you exactly where that happened. That is how trauma works. So as you might imagine, I was very happy to get out of Pittsburgh, PA. And people ask me, why didn't you tell your brothers? Why didn't you tell your parents? Well, I wasn't going to tell my brothers that I couldn't stand up to bullies. I wasn't going to tell my mom, who I was having difficulty with anyways. I wasn't going to tell my father, who was my sense of, my rock, my sense of love, my sense of safety. The guy who ensured me that after watching Chiller Theater in Pittsburgh at 1 a.m, the scary movie, the monsters weren't going to come in my room that night and take me away. It was better just to internalize it and tell no one. And I told no one. So I went to Penn State University. I was so happy to get out of Pittsburgh. My father drove me to Penn State. Freshman orientation, first day, I'm in my dorm. It's a beautiful fall day in this rectangular window. I'm looking out in the parking lot. People getting acquainted, parents talking, people taking their luggage out of the backs of the cars. And I make eye contact with this curly brown-haired girl. I start sweating. I envision my entire life with this girl in 15 seconds. We're going to date, we're going to get married, we're going to have 2 1/2 children. Everything's set. She looks back at me, and I think it's a smile. She turns to her friends, looks back at me again, puts her hand just like this. I remember it like it was yesterday. Ugly, ugly. Ugh. Now, I do not blame that girl for the things that happened after she said that. Environmental triggers are in the millions. If it wasn't this, and it would be that. And people react differently. Another kid might have gone ugly back and flipped her off. Another kid might have said whatever. We react based on how we are genetically, socially, environmentally programmed to react. And at that point, I was programmed to react with shame. And I remember thinking my entire life was out of control. That I would never be loved, that I would never get my first kiss with a girl, that I would never go on a date, that my mother would never love me, because how could she love somebody who is ugly? But my mother loved me dearly, and we have a wonderful relationship today. She loved me dearly. What did I have control over? My entire world is spinning and spinning. What did I have control over as an 18-year-old boy, alone at a university at the size of Penn State? I had control over food. That was it, in my mind. But eating more was associated with fat pig, was associated with the day of the gold pants. So I decided that my path to love, self-love, the love of that curly brown-haired girl, the love of my mother, the respect of my brothers, the respect of the bullies, was to get thinner and restrict my food intake. And restrict, I did. And restrict. And before I knew it, I was binging and purging, traditionally, which is vomiting your food up. I didn't know what bulimia was. I didn't know what an eating disorder was. This is in 1979. This was 4 years before the wonderful, beautiful singer Karen Carpenter, on top of the world, died from complications related to anorexia, bringing it into the pre-digital national spotlight. If you've never heard her, look it up, a golden voice. What I did know was that every time I binged and purged, I felt this sense of peace in my stomach instead of shame. But the problem was that sense of peace lasted for 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and then in swoop the shame of engaging in an act that I didn't understand, that I didn't have a name for, but that I knew was inherently shameful. Guys don't stick their fingers down their throat to throw up their food. They don't do that. I don't know why they don't do that, but it's not what we do. Before anyone was talking about eating disorders. Then I transitioned into drinking at Penn State. I turned 21. I was going to the state stores. I was buying alcohol, putting it in my sock so I could go out and drink alone and get drunk just to go into the bars and get drunker. I was going to class drunk. I was going to class hungover. I was not going to class. I remember the closest I ever came at Penn State as an epiphany on recovery was walking into a hamburger joint and coming across a rack of pamphlets that the 12-step groups put out. And for those who do not know what 12-step is, Alcoholics Anonymous is the most well-known of them, although there are others. They're called the 20 questions, the pamphlets, and it was geared towards college students. Answer this many questions, check them off, and you may be a problem drinker, and I'm checking off, do you black out? Yes. Do you miss class? And I crumple it up, the first basket I ever made in their wastebasket, 2 points, I'm just a college student. We all do this. But they don't all do that. Then I transitioned into running excessive distances because the only time I felt at peace was when there was no one around me who I could make eye contact with and project that they were saying, you are a fat pig, you are not wanted, you will never be loved. And so I would run 10 miles a day, 20 miles a day, and then I would come back and eat and binge and purge. Some days I was so weak and dehydrated, it was difficult to get out of bed. I was able to graduate from Penn State. I was a criminal justice major. I wanted to be a police officer. That would have worked out well. I would have been the first guy in the evidence room training out the blow for the mannitol. I guarantee it. There'd be a movie about me, I just wouldn't be alive to watch it. I'm sitting in the placement office at Penn State, looking through police officer jobs, and there are these two guys from Pittsburgh, where I grew up, sitting next to me. They're talking about taking the LSATs. Law school admission test. And they're talking about going to the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. Pittsburgh Law School admission test. Ding, 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 the bells go off in my head. What bells do you think those were? Not the bells of I want to be a lawyer, not the bells of I want to change the world, not the bells of I want to make a lot of money. The bells of I can stay in school for 3 more years and I can run 10 to 20 miles a day. I can drink my shame away, drink my pain away. I can binge and purge. I can isolate, and I can engage in the exact same survival behaviors that got me through 4 years at Penn State. because it wasn't about where I would be in 3 years. It was about where I would be with my life 10 minutes from now. I was surviving. I was not living. Day to day, moment to moment, second to second. That was what I knew. That was all I knew. And for those reasons, it made perfect sense for me to go to law school. Yep, that's it. That was my rationale. So I did well enough on the LSATs. My grades were well enough to get into Pitt Law. And I went to the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, 1986. I remember taking the bus from my parents' house. I get out and I'm looking in. Everyone's getting ready to go into the large courtroom for 1L orientation where they talk to you about this, they talk to you about that. And I'm looking at the crowd inside the glass doors. I see people getting away, getting acquainted, laughing, looking like they already knew each other. I think I even saw that curly, brown-haired girl. Well, not really, but in my mind, every girl in there was that curly, brown-haired girl, and every guy in there was the guys that ripped my pants off because I was projecting. Instead of realizing that they're all worried about their stuff, whether they're going to make it, I'm projecting that they're all thinking about me and what a lousy human being I am, what a fat pig I am, how undeserving I am to be there. Projection, not uncommon in addiction and depression. And the irony of all that is when I projected, it made perfect sense to me. I made the right decision. This is where I need to be because I will gladly now engage in those exact same behaviors and make it through 3 years of law school. But as we know, you can't just pull an all-nighter before a test in law school, give the information back the next day, and do well. Well, at least I can't. I know if some of you gunners out there maybe did, but I can't. I was not a very good law student, as you might imagine. Going to class sometimes drunk, going to class hungover, not going to class. I did my 1L moot court intoxicated, yes. A microcosm of my 3 years of Pitt Law would be my first year civil procedure class. You're all shrugging, oh, civil procedure. I show up one day, it was a morning class. I had been out all night drinking. I didn't know where my books were. I hadn't changed. I smelled. My 2 seatmates were, dude, go home. Take the L for this class. Just go home. Take the 0. You stink. And I'm sitting there, and the professor is working some jurisdictional problem on a blackboard. I think it was Pennoyer v. Neff or something like that. And I'm shrinking in my seat. I'm shrinking. Don't call me. Don't call me. Don't call me. Please. Mr. Cuban. What do you think of this problem here on the board? Professor, I don't have my books. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared. Pause. Well, Mr. Cuban, when you say you're not prepared, do you mean you're not prepared to answer this? What if I change the fact scenario to this? Professor, I'm sorry, I am just not ready here. I don't have my books. The Socratic method at work. Pause. Let me go home. Please. Mr. Cuban, I understand you don't have your books and you're not prepared. I uttered an expletive under my breath, but my words project, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to utter an expletive at their Civ Pro professor. One day I'll ask him if he heard me, and I booked up and I ran out of the room. That was my 3 years of Pitt Law. I graduated not here. You can't see my feet, but I was way down there by the skin of my teeth. I still have reoccurring nightmares about going to graduation, walking up to get my diploma, and the dean pulling it back, going, psych, you didn't graduate, psych. And I wake up going like this, and I'm sweating, The irony of that, more irony, is that I was so ashamed and didn't care. I didn't even go to graduation. Just mail it to me. It's okay. Now we are repeating cycles again. What am I going to do with my life? I'm going to move to Dallas, Texas. Why? Because my older brother Mark and Jeff had already moved there. I will be with the 2 people who do not judge me, who love me unconditionally. I had $50 to my name. I took a Greyhound bus. Mark met me at a McDonald's right by the Greyhound station downtown, Dallas, and I moved in with him. And it was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Whew! This was 1986, going into 87. They're in their 20s, and they're out partying, they're out dating. They didn't do drugs, but they're out going to the bars and dating. I fit right in. My drinking escalated. I hadn't passed the bar. I had no job yet. And then one day in a bathroom in 1987 of an upscale Dallas hotel, in the only suit I owned that my father bought for me at Sears after high school, befitting my status as a non-barred lawyer who is a quote-unquote alcoholic with alcohol use disorder and bulimic, I was out there partying away, telling lies, playing a role, and I was introduced to cocaine. I did my first line of cocaine in that bathroom, and it was Katie bar the door, because while that high had overtaken me for the first time in my life, the first time I looked in the mirror and I loved who I saw. Even though it was artificial, I loved who I saw. It swept into my stomach and replaced the self-loathing that binging and purging couldn't cure. It replaced the self-loathing that getting drunk all the time couldn't cure. It was, whoo! I had to have that again and again and again, because every time I did a line, I loved me. My mother loved me. That curly brown-haired girl loved me. Everyone in the nightclub I was about to walk in loved me. It was like nothing I had ever experienced. Cocaine and alcohol took over my life. I failed the Texas bar exam 2.5 times. The first time I took the Texas bar exam in Fort Worth, my study aids the weekend before the exam were bar review books I borrowed that weekend. Yes, that weekend. 3.5 ounces of cocaine and a liter of Tab. I'm not a Tab guy anymore. I'm more into the Coke Zero. Do they still make Tab? But it was a thing back then. As you might imagine, I failed. And it was funny, back then they send letters. I guess it's all on a computer now. But they send letters, and the letter comes, and I knew. But it's like when you're turning over your ticket to see if you won the lotto, right? You're going, oh, come on. Oh, yes. Failed. And I failed it again for pretty much the same reasons. And in the summer of 1990, after my first failed marriage, I'm at a bar. I had 1 too many, 2 too many, 3 too many, 1 too many lines. 1 is 1 too many, 2 too many lines, 3 too many lines, which is why I'm an abstinence person. There are many paths to recovery, not just abstinence. But for me, there is no such thing as 1 line of cocaine, and there is no such thing as 1 drink without 1 line of cocaine. So my path had to be abstinence. I'm driving up this highway called the Dallas North Tollway. I'm literally feet from my house, the exit to my house, just like we read about. Woo, woo, woo! A state trooper. State troopers also work the tollway as well as the DPD, the Dallas Police. He pulls me over. It's a guy that looked like he was in his early 60s. Son, you've been drinking? A few. Yeah, a few too many. Like any drunk. I'm not drunk. He has me get out of the car. He has me do the sobriety test on the side of the tollway. Son, go backwards from Z. X, G, C, nose over here. Oh, sorry, officer. The nose is over here. Did I pass? Click. Nothing like the feel of steel on your wrist to bring you into at least a momentary reality of the situation. I was booked for DWI. They take me down to Sterrett, which is the jail in Dallas. And at that time, I was also, I hate the word abuse, but there's no other word for it. I was abusing anabolic steroids to help me feel better about myself. I was also wearing an earring, a dangling earring, Lyrica shorts and a fanny pack, and my arms were in a shirt too tight. Imagine that. Don't imagine that. And at that time, it was an assembly process booking line where the Dallas County, where the sheriffs book you. And I filled out my card, and the deputy sheriff looks at my card. He holds it up like this. He puts his face 2 inches from me, and he's reading it. You're a lawyer? He goes, sniffing, puts it down. You know you stink. look left, look right. Sheriff, is this a trick question? I didn't say that, but of course I stink. I've been out partying all night. And so I went through this hazing through the deputy sheriffs, which everyone goes through. I was no one special. Get put in the drunk tank, got bailed out, pled not guilty as was my right. And of course I blew in the breathalyzer because I wasn't drunk. I'm a lawyer, doesn't matter. I wasn't drunk, and I blew a .11. The trial date comes, one of my 9 lives before sobriety, and my lawyer, shout out to Rich Warfield, my lawyer the day of trial comes out of the DA workroom with a piece of paper, a dismissal. He said, "Happy birthday early." What do you mean? The state trooper's not showing up. They dismissed the case. Thank you, Rich, thank you, bear hug him. Don't thank me, thank them in the district attorney's workroom. I didn't know he was kidding. I open the door and there are 3 district attorneys sitting in there and I shake it, I go, "Thank you." They look at me like they wanted to throw me out of the window. He pulls me back, Rich, and says, "I was kidding. Get out of here before they refile." I know what you're thinking. How does this guy still have his license? Has it been suspended? No, neither, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. And I say that tongue-in-cheek, but it's a very real issue. Look in the back of any state bar journal, and you're going to see how real it is. The disbarments, the suspensions, a percentage of those are directly correlated to drug and alcohol use or some other mental health issue. That was one of my 9 lives. Apparently, and this is hearsay, the trooper retired and went back to wherever, Texas, and he wasn't coming to testify against Brian Cuban. Whew. Thank you wherever you are, Mr. State Trooper. Enjoy your retirement. So I got through that. Learned no lessons, right back at it. Drinking, failed marriages, just the shame continuing to build. And I would try to counteract that shame with more cocaine. I was engaging in borderline and crossing the borderline unethical conduct. I was using chiropractors to calm me down when they had somebody in an accident, and I would go down there with my briefcase full of contingency agreements and sit there. The chiropractor would come out with a client, "Mr. Cuban, what are you doing here?" Mr. Cuban is our top trial lawyer. Mr. Cuban's never stepped in a courtroom. Mr. Cuban will get you the maximum settlement. Mr. Cuban will sell you down the river so he doesn't have to step in the courtroom. This is what happens with drugs and alcohol. It is not the person I wanted to be. It is not the person anyone wanted to be. It is not the person that would be respected, but it was what it was at that point in time. Finally, reputations get around, and I had no clients left. And I became so despondent that I would there would be no time when I would look in the mirror and love who I saw and have the love and respect of my family without drugs and alcohol. In my mind, although they did love me. And I decided to end my life by suicide in the summer of 2005. And it was close. At the urging of a friend by email, who got a disturbing email from me, my brothers came into my house. Jeff came first. Mark flew in from LA. There was a .45 automatic on my nightstand. There's cocaine everywhere. There's black market Xanax everywhere. I was using that too. Cocaine at night, Xanax in the morning. Cocaine at night, Xanax in the morning, because I didn't want to live. I wanted to just survive day to day without ever having to know which day it was. Not unusual. They clean up the scene, and I remember as they're taking me out of the house, kicking and screaming. They're trying to save my life, and all I can think of is leave me alone. I remember Jeff saying he's got an addiction problem. I remember Mark saying it's depression, and they were both right. I deal with major depression episodes. I was also dealing with addiction. They can exist independently, and they are often exist together and intersect. So I still deal with depression today, even though I am going to be 13 years in sobriety April 8th. So what happens? We're in the waiting room at this psychiatric hospital. I just want to leave. They take me in there with the attending psychiatrist and psychiatric nurse. I'm screaming. I'm blaming them for my problems. I'm blaming everyone for my problems. It's all about you guys. If you would just do this, if you would just do that, everything would be fine. If you would just leave me alone, everything would be fine. Thank God they didn't mind their own business and didn't leave me alone. But they couldn't keep me there because my head had cleared and I kind of knew the rules. And so they couldn't put a hold on me as they wanted to. They took me back home and we did what I call the Cuban rehab. They said, stay in your house for 2 weeks, we'll take your car keys and everything's going to be okay. I had two thoughts to that. One, no problem, my drug dealer delivers, the Mavericks tickets guy. And two, now they know. Now they really know. So what am I going to do? I'm not going to try to get better. I'm going to distance. I'm going to distance from my father, from my brothers, from my nieces and nephews, and go back with the people who really understand me, who really love me, at least until the cocaine is gone. Those people. And I think it's important to stop here and talk a second about privilege. I went through addiction and I recovered in privilege. It would be as disingenuous as possible for me not to acknowledge that. We talk about addiction not discriminating. That is true. But there are different levels of privilege that give us access to different resources. I had access to resources that many people don't have. And I can't not acknowledge that to you. I just didn't want to take advantage of them. There are people who don't have the opportunities I was given to recover. I existed and exist on several levels of privilege. So we have to keep that in mind. And I do acknowledge that because I know some of you are thinking about that. This guy, he has this, he has that. Yes, that is true. But that is where I was, that is where I am. So I did distance and I'm right back out at it. Now I have no job. Mark put me to work for him. I failed miserably. He put me to work as the point guy for when they were building the American Airlines Center. And I was showing up at those meetings in this construction warehouse, high on cocaine, drunk, and he had to pull me out of that. And here is where the enormous privilege comes in. My brother was supporting me because he loved me. He didn't want to see me under a bridge. Is that enablement? Sure, absolutely. But enablement has to be judged in the situation you're in, and it's often judged in the rearview mirror by whether it worked or not. That enablement and that privilege, yes, got me here talking to all of you. In January of 2006, I was out celebrating my birthday, one of my week-long birthday celebrations that started when the cocaine began and the cocaine ended. I'm at this bar in Dallas, Texas, drunk and high, and this woman walks in. Her name's Amanda, very light drinker, doesn't do drugs, had come in after a football game that she was watching, a playoff game. I believe it was the Patriots. She had just moved back to Dallas from living in Boston. We start talking, and I guess I was able to put on the mask of respectability one last time, these masks we wear in addiction and depression, that we can show everyone how happy we are, right? We're happy, these masks. But the deeper in I got, the harder and harder it became to wear the mask. So I gave it one last put on. We started dating. We decided we're going to move in with each other. I remember one of my friends saying, how is that going to work with what you do in your lifestyle and her lifestyle and what she doesn't do? I said, it'll cause me to stop. I'll stop. This is what I need to stop. It's not how addiction works. What is addiction? Obsessive compulsive drug seeking in the face of known consequences, right? So we moved in together, Easter weekend, 2007. She goes away to visit family. Next thing I know, it's 2 days later. I'm lying in bed. It's late Sunday afternoon. She's looking down at me. There's cocaine everywhere. There's alcohol, Xanax. I'm lying in bed. Ah. She's trying to figure out if she walked in the right house. She's a lawyer. I'm trying to figure out what lie I can tell to explain this law and order orgy of evidence that I just might not be the person she thought I was. All I could think of was the metaphorical run home to mama. Take me back to and I named this psychiatric facility. It was Green Oaks. You've been to a psychiatric facility? Now it's called psychiatric hospital. You've been to a psychiatric facility? Yeah, there's some things you don't know about me. We'll talk about that on the way down. I don't want to talk about that now because I need that time to think of a lie you'll believe. We get down there and we're standing in the parking lot waiting for intake. She's crying. And I'm thinking she's gone. I'd leave. She stood by me. And we dated for over a decade while I rebuilt the broken trust, while I found recovery. A saint. And we have now been married over 3.5 years. Not all relationships will survive these things, but they can. But this one did, ours did, because I did the work. I did the work not to keep her, not to keep my family. I did the work because I finally came to realize as I went through recovery that unless I recovered for me, that I was still going to be in trouble, because regardless, people leave, people die, trauma happens, pets leave us and cross the rainbow bridge. Recovery had to be bigger than all of that. And she stayed. The next day, I walked into my psychiatrist's office, who I'd been lying to. I'd been seeing him for 2 years. And I finally began to get honest with him. Well, why would you lie to your psychiatrist? You're paying him. Shame knows no hourly rate. It doesn't. I was ashamed. I was ashamed of the eating disorder, which at that point I knew I had. I was ashamed at being, just in my mind, this worthless excuse on the Texas State bar rules as a lawyer. A horrible boyfriend, a horrible brother, a horrible son. I was ashamed of so many things. And I finally released some of that shame with a step into the unknown. I finally allowed the concept of compassionate community to take hold in a small way. And I remember my psychiatrist saying, well, we have a lot of things we have to get to, Brian. We have to tear back all the onions of your life. Who wants to do that? Just tell me how to get sober. I don't want to revisit that little boy. Just tell me how to get sober. That's all I want. So I can keep this and keep that, and I can show my family I'm doing this. Because on that first day of sobriety, that's really what was on my mind, about what I'm losing, not necessarily what was ahead. Would you consider going to residential treatment? I'm not going to residential treatment. I blew up in his office. I'm not going. There are no lawyers in residential treatment, right? And by the way, doctor, I'm a busy lawyer. I saw an auto accident outside when I came in. I'm going to leave here, flip him my card. He's going to call me, and I'll be a very busy lawyer. Too busy to go to treatment. How the mind works in addiction. Would you consider 12-step? And the 12-step meeting place was right next door. I'm not going to 12-step. There are no lawyers in 12-step. I walked in there, and half of them were lawyers I knew. I can't go to 12-step. I see them smoking out there, doctor. Secondhand smoke will kill you, as sure as I'm standing here, right? Always a reason, always a reason. Well, Brian, we have to do something. And I knew I did because, again, that first day at a minimum, I wanted to show my family that I was taking a step forward. So I decided to walk over to 12-step. And I walked in that room as a lawyer with no clients, as a severe problem drinker, as a bulimic, as somebody with no self-respect, no self-esteem. And I sat down. And I remember comparing stories. Oh, that's bad, yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, you should be here. Go on, live your life, that's okay. None of these people have traded tickets, Dallas Mavericks championship tickets, for cocaine. They don't know my problems. How the mind works, right? Ego, woo! But the more I listened, the more I realized was drink to mouth, powder to nose, I was in a very, and I am, progressive group where people talked about dual addictions, and it's okay. And let me tell you what I wanted more than anything sitting in that chair for the first day. Regardless of whether I was an alcoholic, and I put it in air quotes because the clinical term is alcohol use disorder. I wanted just one day of sitting in that room for one day would allow me to wake up, walk to my bathroom mirror, strip naked birthday suit, look in that mirror, and love the person I saw without the aid of alcohol or cocaine or needing to binge and purge. If I could do that just one morning, if sitting in that room would give me that gift, I would sit. And I sat, and I sat, and I sat. And during that time, I engaged in a lot of therapy to repair the underlying void, to repair the story. I engaged my compassionate community to help me repair the story. Acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of different types of therapy geared towards my self-image and loving myself. Because I was now stripped naked to having to bear the pain without all of the substances. And that is brutal, was brutal for me. But I had my 12-step group. I had my compassionate community. So I went day by day and got a little bit better day by day. And I stand here talking to you today, going on 13 years in recovery. I have repaired the relationship with my mother. We have a wonderful relationship today. We sat down and we talked about what she went through, the abuse she went through with her mother, the tools she was given as a young mother. I forgave her. She forgave me. And I'm not telling you what forgiveness should mean to you because people have been through awful things. I can only tell you what it meant to me, and I let go of the anger. I let go of the anger of the bullies who ripped my clothes off. I've been connected at different times with those kids. People say, don't you want them to know what they did to you? Did you tell them? Of course not. These are 59-year-old men. These aren't 15-year-old boys. This isn't Maury Povich. I'm not the father, right? It's not a reality show. I want them to be leading happy lives, have happy marriages, happy children, hopefully not repeating cycles and teaching their children differently about bullying than they were taught or not taught. And when I look back at my life in the legal profession, I went through this at a time when there really was no compassionate community. We had a different culture. We drank hard alcohol in the community lounge at Pitt Law. We didn't have a dean of students. We didn't really have people you can go to, and that's not their fault. They're not bad people. It was a different time. When I was going through this and I got my DWI, I had never heard of the Texas Lawyers Assistance Program. It was only a few years old. And now I want to circle back to other ways in which compassionate community can help us move forward as a profession. So how do we build and nurture empathy as a skill set so that we can foster a compassionate community? Here are a few suggestions. 1, integrate empathy building skills as part of your wellness initiative. Sometimes we forget that we have this empathy skill set when we deal with our struggles in daily lives. 2, a firm may have an excellent pro bono practice, and that's tremendous, but that is empathy on a lawyer-client vertical. Consider how to build it lawyer to lawyer laterally. 3, encourage storytelling, whether it's at a law school level, state or local bar event, your firm retreat, or new associate orientation. Stories do so much more than entertain. They put forward values and information within the community. When stories engage us on an emotional, empathetic level, it is science-driven that we remember the takeaways better than when lectured to. In the realm of mental health, this emotional connection is vital because it lets others know that they are not alone in their journey, and that breaks stigma. It's also data-driven science that storytelling changes the brain ties communities together and drives those communities to be more empathetic to each other. Don't need the first few tools? Here's the 2-ask rule. It requires nothing but uttering 5 words. How are you doing today? Before that interaction terminates, let the person know you were an open ear. The 2-ask rule. You just became part of a compassionate community. There is so much more to building a compassionate community, but now you have a few tools that require few assets, little time, and offer a fantastic reward. The ability to step outside your comfort zone and let someone know that you care about them. Thank you for having me. I care about you.
Thank you, Brian, for that wonderful presentation. We will now go ahead and move on to audience questions. So if anyone has a question for Brian that you'd like to ask, please feel free to submit that through that Q&A button at the control panel at the bottom of your screen. We'll just wait a couple minutes for this to come through. All right, looks like we've already got a couple coming in. All right, our first question for Brian is going to be, how can one balance the need for support with concerns about potential professional repercussions?
Are we talking about ourselves or a colleague would be the first thing I want to know. If we're talking about ourselves, there are many ways to find support that can be fit into a day. For me, it was 12-step groups, right? I got sober in 12-step. And so there's always a bunch of 12-step groups going on. And I thought that was very easy to fit into my busy schedule as a lawyer while I was practicing. I no longer practice. So it's really going to depend on the individual, but there are as many ways to recover as there are, addictions. And so it's going to be what feels right for you in your situation. Are you a solo? Are you in a big firm? A big firm is going to have more resources integrated into their structure than a solo firm. You're going to have to go to the lawyer's assistance program, or you go to 12-step, and so you'll have to look outside your kind of safety bubble to find what you need. And a boutique firm, there may not be anything, right? In my experience, I found that mid-sized firms really lag in terms of offering the support structure that somebody might need with a busy schedule. So I think it's really going to depend on the situation. And there are even things you can do that are online that you don't even have to leave your office or your house. A great example is the resource In the Rooms, where you can go online and in the rooms and you can find just about every kind of meeting there is, from smoking to cocaine to alcohol to depression, and fit that into a schedule, whether that's your lunch break or whether that's at home or before you leave for work. And so you can work that in. It's how much do you want to work it in? There's also another wonderful resource out of New York called the Lawyer's Depression Project. If depression is part of your struggle, it is for me. My depression exists independently from my recovery from addiction. And so I still struggle with it today and take antidepressants. And so they have meetings that you can find, generally during lunch, that you can work in. So it is possible. It's just, do you want to make the time?
Thank you for that insight and those resources. I know that's really helpful. Another person had a question kind of related to 12-step. So how often did you attend 12-step? Did you ever become a sponsor? And do you still attend?
When I first got sober, April 8th, 2007, I walked into the rooms April 8th, and I was going to 3 meetings a day, because for me, and I see this a lot with alcohol, and especially things like cocaine, and especially with younger lawyers, because you tend to be more social. I had to, during those early days and those early months, I'm sitting alone, and I had good family support, which is a privilege, but there was still that pull back to that life, right? What am I missing? Will I ever, will anyone ever love me again? Will this ever happen again? And I had all of these fears that were in my head for the most part that were kept pulling me back to this lifestyle. So I had to be sure I had the support during those moments at my weakest times. So, well, when were my weakest times? Well, the evenings, weekends. So I made sure I went to meetings then. I made sure I went to meetings at lunch, and many times I went to meetings in the morning. So I always had that support. Now, did I keep going to 3 meetings a day forever? No. I scaled it back as I created my support group outside of 12-step. And eventually that support group of people who didn't use blow and who lives didn't have to revolve around going out drinking, that all balanced out as I created my new social group. But going in, and this is such a common fear, I couldn't comprehend in any universe having a new social group and having a day where the urge to use wasn't pulling me. And so as those things balanced out, my meetings decreased. I went then 2 times, and then the lunch meeting at my home group, my home 12-step group became the most important to me. And now and then the pandemic hit and it was mostly online. And so now I go mostly online because my group still offers those. So they are important. There are many paths to recovery. Mine I was only offered treatment, which I refused, and 12-step. That was it. But there are many kinds. There's harm reduction, because now we have the opioid crisis where people are on Suboxone and methadone, which is a very stigmatized issue in the legal profession because it is a 12-step oriented profession. But when I say 12-step, it is not my intent to say that is the only way to recover.
Thank you, Brian. I think we have time for one more question. Are there specific strategies or accommodations that you believe can be implemented in the workplace to support recovery?
Yes. Having people, in the workplace, having people, especially in firms, having a point person for someone that they can go to without repercussion to talk about having a problem. Now, as we know, a firm is not, you can't ask certain questions, right? And you can take medical leave, you can take family medical leave to do certain things, and it's against the law to ask why. But everyone knows. It gets out and everyone knows. So it starts with firms putting in place non-judgmental structures and understanding that everyone is going through something, and having that pipeline structure in place so where someone can go to a point person who maybe has been in recovery, where they can talk about their problems without fear of repercussion. And that's easy. And I know that's easier said than done. It's, big firms have it. AmLaw firms, a lot of them have these structures in place. But the further down your line you get into solo, you have to create your own backstops. It's not as easy. But I encourage everyone. The funny thing is that even in small firms and mid-sized firms, everyone knows somebody who is struggling. Everybody. Addiction is so prevalent in our society, and depression. So I'd always encourage those people. Well, somebody, if it was your child, if it was your spouse, what protocols would you want in place to bring that person back? Why don't you do that for the people in your firm that you care about? Put those protocols in place and treat them like family. And when you start treating them like your family, I think you'll look at it in a different light.
Well, thank you, Brian, for your perspective and sharing your story. And thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We'll now go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did enjoy it, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next clip.